Hello and welcome to this next module, which is entitled Book Pricing. Now within this module I'm going to give you an insight into my thoughts, the thought process I use when coming up with a price point for my book. Now obviously the price of a book will depend on a number of different factors, and I will list those in this module. It will also depend on whether you are pricing a printed book or a Kindle book, because they will obviously vary. Inevitably, a Kindle book is usually priced at a lower point than a print book. With a print book, you have more production costs involved with the printing, the typesetting, etc. Whereas a Kindle conversion, you generally just have the one cost, which is the conversion of the manuscript to Kindle. So the first thing I want you to ask yourself is, what is the content in your book worth to your readers? Okay, so with a lot of my books, which are non-fiction, there is generally a transformation at the end, i.e. somebody is able to get a job which might give them a salary of say 30 or 40,000 pounds a year. Therefore, I'm not going to sell the majority of my career related books at £10 because I want to pitch them a bit higher. I will sell them at 13 or 15 pounds because the transformation at the end has a value for the reader if they follow the content and the tips that I provide them with. Okay, so what is the content in your book worth to your readers? Think about that. So it's not about you and how much you want from the book, it's thinking from a reader's perspective, which I very much focus on this in the entire publishing model, creating content that is valuable to my readers and also thinking about what they want from the content. So I've split this up into two parts. Do take notes. Things to consider when pricing your book. A lower recommended retail price does not necessarily mean you will sell more copies. Okay, it doesn't automatically mean that if you drop the price or you half the price that you'll sell more copies, because there is this thing called perceived value. Sometimes the lower price might put people off. Okay, so I'm one of those people, and I don't like being like this, by the way, but I'm one of those people who thinks that if I'm going to pay more for something, that I'm getting something of more value, and that generally is the case. However, it doesn't always apply. So just bear that in mind. If you lower the price, it doesn't mean you're going to sell more copies. Amazon has the final decision as to how much discount it offers its readers. Although I might list a book at £15, Amazon are able to then drop the price to under £10 if it wishes. It's entirely up to them, but you will still get paid based on the recommended retail price. So if you're using Amazon Advantage and you're pitching your book at £15, that's the retail price, Amazon will still take 60% off the retail price. You get 40% of £15 regardless of what price they sell it at. Number 3, non-fiction books will generally list for a higher price than fiction books. Okay, that's generally the rule. Usually you see a lot of fiction books which are at sale under £10 for the print version, and maybe £6 or sometimes under £5 for the Kindle version, but non-fiction books are generally higher. And number 4, Kindle versions should generally be lower than a printed version, as I've just mentioned. Don't be afraid to start at a higher price and then drop it later on if you are not happy with the sales. So this is something we will do. We'll start off with a higher price because it's easier to drop the price than it is to put it up. Take a look on Amazon to see what other books in the same genre as yours are selling at. So do a bit of research, have a look at the same genre for your book. If you're doing a children's book, have a look around, type into Amazon children's books and just go down through all the pages and take a note of what price other publishers are, pitching their books at. Now, obviously, your individual circumstances will be different from, say, a very large publisher who has big buying power when it comes to, buying hardback printed books or paperback printed books. They can generally afford to order thousands of copy of litho. So if you look at the book Printing Basics module, I talk about litho and digital printing. So they are able to spend more money on litho printing, which then brings the cost per unit of the book down. Whereas you starting out are probably going to order digital copies of your book, and therefore you need to have a higher price point. So you have to take into consideration your production costs, including printing. So when you are setting out creating a book, keep a close eye on your costs. How much have I spent on my book cover design? How much have I spent on typesetting, Kindle conversion, proofreading, copy editing? The list goes on. How much have I spent on these? And therefore you will need to decide how much you want to make per unit, per book that you are selling, and then you'll be able to work out how many copies you need to sell before you break even. Things to consider part 2. If your book has colour internal pages, you will probably have to increase your price in order to make a profit. Okay, so if you're going to use Amazon CreateSpace, when you go onto CreateSpace, have a look at their royalty calculator, because there's a royalty calculator on Amazon CreateSpace, and you can input the number of pages your book is, whether you have internal color pages with a bleed or not, and then it will tell you how much profit you're going to make. So you can actually then work out your price point based on that calculator. Now, although it is good practice to look at what other authors and publishers are doing, and I would encourage you to do that, your price should be set on your own individual circumstances. Okay, so don't just solely compete with other people or match other people, because remember, larger publishers will have different circumstances. They will have more buying power. They can buy more copies of books. Okay, because they'll spend more with their printer, they will get the lower prices. Generally, books set at a very high price do not sell that well. It doesn't matter what subject you are publishing in. Generally, books set at a very high price do not sell that well. And I'm talking about books which are pitched at 30, 40, 50, or even, £100. And I do understand some authors come to me and they say, but my content is highly transformable. It will help the reader to make a lot of money from investing in property or investing in shares. But I always say there is sort of a ceiling which people are prepared to invest in. And generally, if you set the book at a higher price, you will more often than not sell fewer copies. Number 4, if the sole purpose of your book is to generate leads, and what I mean by leads is name and email addresses, lead generation, consider setting a very low price for both print and Kindle. There is there's pros and cons to this, because what you might find is that people, if you set your book at say £1 or £2 or even 99p for a Kindle book, people will get it, but they might not actually read the content and therefore not go to your website to give their name and email address. So it is sort of like it's open to debate, this is, but you could try, if you are solely using the book to generate leads to then do upsells from your book, then try dropping the price very low. Before I set a price for my book, I will ask myself what I think the content is worth to the reader. I've already mentioned that, but I think to myself, well, how much are they prepared to pay for this? And it will always be a ceiling, but like I say, I'm in career sector and education sector, so I think about my readers, how much money they would probably have of disposable income. And I think, well, if they're applying for a job, they're not going to have that much money, therefore I won't go too high in the price point. Conversely, if they're going for a job which is going to give them a brilliant income, say 30, 40, 50,000 pounds a year, then I would pitch it a little bit higher. But generally, I don't go above £15 for the majority of my books. Number 6, if you have chosen a niche, so you've chosen a market where there is little or no competition, start off at a higher price, pitch it slightly higher, because no one's competing with you, so why not take the whole of the market? Sometimes when competing with other books, I will increase the price. This is a good strategy, and this is again perceived value. Okay, so I'll start off with other books. I will look at other books on the market. I will generally read the reviews, what people are saying about them, and I think I might pitch my book £2 or £3 higher, because I think my content is better than theirs. Okay, so perceived value. So if you were to push me and say, tell me a price that I should put my books at, well, again, it's entirely up to you. That there's no particular reasons why I'm saying these prices, but generally for non-fiction, you might decide at £12.97 for print, £8.97 for Kindle, perhaps. That will be based on about a 200-page printed book. Fiction is certainly different. The issue with fiction books is generally your page count will be a lot longer. You might be doing a book which is 300 or 400 pages. Therefore, it's going to be harder for you to make a profit because of your printing costs. So I would encourage you with fiction is to use CreateSpace, so they are printed on demand. So say fiction generally £9.97 or even lower, and a Kindle price just under £5. For children's books it is entirely different because you will have higher printing costs. Now I've put there a print price of £6.98. Now obviously this will be very much dependent on the thickness of your book. If your children's book is just 10 pages, it's 10 or 15 pages in length and it's full colour, you might only get away with charging £6.98, and the Kindle could be slightly less, but with the Kindle you would generally get a high royalty rate of 70%. Okay, and you wouldn't have the production costs apart from the electronic delivery costs of Amazon delivering it to the reader. So yeah, it very much depends on loads of different factors, the reader, your own circumstances as well. For those people who are working with me on my VIP author mentoring program, the gold level, you get 100 copies of your book in print format once it is published and printed, and therefore you can make the majority costs back of the program through those 100 copies, and you could try different prices for your particular niche based on the thickness of your book. So, like I say at the beginning, no set rules on book pricing, but I hope this module has given you a bit of an insight into what I personally do, and it will help you moving forward. Thank you very much for watching, and move on to